Assembly Bill 6506, which would create legislation which would legalize the sport of mixed martial arts. Now, mixed martial arts has a long history, certainly a history here in New York. I think what is important is that the sport has grown tremendously since the mid-1990s. It has also grown up a lot. It's changed a lot. Mixed martial arts is now part of the sports landscape in North America. The sport is now seen on major sports broadcasters such as the partnership that my company, our company, the UFC, has with Fox Sports. And there are various other mixed martial arts leagues that are broadcast in this country and throughout the state of New York on cable channels as well as other broadcast networks. We believe that it's very important that this bill be passed for a number of different reasons. First and foremost, for the state to provide a safe, regulated environment for the athletes to be able to compete in, making sure that the rules and regulations are in place, all the pre-fight and post-fight testing is in place for their safety. In addition to that, creating a structure that will allow the state to tax this sport and benefit from the economics that the sport brings and the tourism that this sport brings. Our company, the UFC, has proven time in and time out that we create a massive economic windfall for the cities that we bring our events. There have been various third parties that have come in and done economic studies to measure that. They have estimated that in upstate New York alone that we will generate in excess of $100 million in economic activity within the first couple of years, create a significant number of jobs, high-paying jobs, in addition to union jobs when we bring our events to places like the First Niagara Center here in Buffalo. We're very excited to potentially have that opportunity. And I'm also excited to introduce today that we have Assemblyman Dennis Gaberzak, a Democrat from Buffalo and actually one of the sponsors of this bill. He's here today, and I think he'd like to make a few statements regarding the benefits that legalizing the sport of mixed martial arts would have for the state of New York and specifically upstate New York.
Thank you. I'm glad to be a co-sponsor of the legislation. We've been at this now for a number of years, and I think we're very close to getting it done. We have 6 weeks left in session, and in that 6-week period, I think this is one of the priorities that we should be putting on in getting it passed. As was mentioned, there's a huge economic opportunity that exists. You see the activity that's happening around outside the windows over here, the hotels that are going up, the construction that's happening. UFC, bringing an event like that into this area, is going to help fill those hotels, it's going to help fill the restaurants, rental cars, vendors, this arena. It's going to bring people back into this arena for those events. And if you take a look at what that's going to mean for the local economy, that will be a huge boost in terms of sales tax revenue, in terms of bringing different vendors together, in terms of helping the economy in Western New York. Besides Western New York, there's a benefit for New York State also. New York State is one of only a few states in the nation that doesn't sanction UFC. Mixed martial arts has come a long way. Initially, I can say honestly that I wasn't a big fan of MMA and UFC. But I've taken the time to study the issue, looked at both sides, seen what's been done to make the sport better. You have athletes who train here, who come from New York, who spend an awful lot of time, are very skilled athletes in what they do in their art, in mixed martial arts, but they don't have the opportunity to fight in their own state. And I think that's something that we need to change. That's something we need to allow New Yorkers to take advantage of, to be able to come to the fights. Right now, I know there's New Yorkers that go up to Toronto for the fight or go into Pennsylvania. Give them the opportunity to see homegrown talent and those that take part in UFC to come here. You'll see a fight here at this center to see fights in New York at Madison Square Garden. New Yorkers deserve that opportunity. And in the next few weeks, hopefully, we're going to be able to pass that legislation and make that dream actually come true for everyone in the state of New York. Thank you.
Thank you. You know, there's obviously a lot of great things that we love about the sport of mixed martial arts, but actually one of the best things is our athletes and the way that they conduct themselves, their backgrounds. We have two of our top athletes here today. We have Uriah Hall, who was a member of the cast of The Last Ultimate Fighter, which aired on the FX network. Uriah became very popular very quickly based on his abilities, his martial arts techniques, and the success that he had in that tournament reality show. In addition to Uriah, we have Ryan LaFleur, who's an undefeated fighter. He's now with the UFC. He's undefeated in the UFC. He's a tremendous wrestler and a tremendous prospect. Uriah Hall is actually from Queens, New York, and Ryan is from Long Island, New York. I'm going to ask Ryan to step up to the podium just for a second and say a few words. Both of these gentlemen will be available for one-on-ones if anyone's interested in asking them questions, but I'm going to let Ryan come up here and say a few words about his experience with the sport, and his experience being a business owner with the sport in Long Island, and everything about his background.
How you doing? I'm Ryan LaFleur. I've been an athlete my whole life. I've been wrestling, playing lacrosse, everything. As soon as I graduated from college, I decided I wanted to pursue my mixed martial arts career. You know, I devoted my life to it. I opened a gym up in Long Island. You know, I have a wife, a kid. I coach. I do everything. It means the most to me to be able to, you know, represent my state and try to get it legalized here in New York. You know, I don't think it's fair to everybody here. You know, it's legal to train here, it's illegal to do everything about it, to watch it here, just can't have it here. And I think it's very important that we make it legalized here and prove to everybody that it's not we're not barbarians. We're actually athletes and real people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. You know, one of the points that I like to bring up is that while the Ultimate Fighting Championship is the most well-known, it's certainly the biggest promotion in mixed martial arts. We are just a piece of a very large industry. If this legislation were to pass, it wouldn't just be the UFC coming in and putting on events, but a number of other large promoters, medium-sized promoters, as well as small promoters, creating economic activity, creating jobs for upstate New York. One example I'd like to use is that we were very involved in advocating for the sport to be legalized in the state of California in the early years. Once it was passed, it really created an entire new industry that didn't exist before that had happened. Just last year, there were over 100 mixed martial arts events in the state of California alone. The Ultimate Fighting Championship held 3. So as you can see, we're a small part of what can become a very big industry. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jason Trebezinski. Thought I had that down, but I was close. But he's a small business owner. He's an owner of the Buffalo Training Center here in Buffalo. Very involved in the sport of mixed martial arts, and I'm happy that he was able to join us here today, and I'm going to ask him to say a few words.
Yeah, much like Ryan, I've been doing martial arts most of my life, and I've been involved in mixed martial arts for about 10 years now, coaching as well as competing. And I started competing as an amateur. I'd have to drive out to Columbus, Ohio, about 6 hours away from here. My friends and family that wanted to watch me unfortunately couldn't do so. So all the hard training that I've done was kind of unaccessible to those people, to my friends and family. And as a coach, I get to see a lot of recreational members of my academy who train just for fitness, for fun, just as a fun hobby to do, lose weight. They get involved in the competitive athletes training as well, because they're there every day with these guys. They hold pads for them, they do some working out with them. And when it comes time for that match, they don't get to see the end result of all that hard work that everybody as a team puts in. So it's, like Ryan said, it's really not fair that we have to go out of state, sometimes out of country, and up to Toronto to do these competitions when it's a very amazing sport for everyone involved, not just the competitors, but the fans as well. And this city is in love with the sport. Anytime there's a UFC event on, you go to a restaurant, a bar that shows it, and these places are packed. You got to get there 2-3 hours in advance just to get a table. You can see it, again, just anytime there's a UFC event on, the city's packed. So having an event here in Buffalo would be absolutely amazing for the economy.
Thank you. Thank you for participating. And one last thing I would like to point out is just trying to clarify what is the sport of mixed martial arts. Essentially what it is it's the rules have been put together combining sports that are already legal in the state of New York. Many of these sports are either Olympic sports or sports that are in the Pan Am or the Sport Accord Games. Essentially, it's a combination of boxing, which is legal in New York, kickboxing, which is legal in New York, judo, jiu-jitsu, which is legal in New York, as well as Greco-Roman and freestyle wrestling. Those are the techniques that are used in the sport of mixed martial arts. What New York is preventing is not any of those techniques from happening, but preventing athletes such as Ryan and Uriah from going in and competing and using whatever technique that they feel comfortable using. So all of these techniques are already legal, all of these events are already happening, and in fact, amateur mixed martial arts is legal in the state of New York, to make matters even more confusing. The only thing that is not allowed here is professional mixed martial arts that would be regulated by the New York State Athletic Commission, that would make sure that the fighters are safe, that they go through pre-fight and post-fight testing, that the required professionals are on hand at the arenas while the events are going on. And that's all we're asking for. We're asking for the state of New York to step up to the plate and regulate the sport just as 48 other states in the United States have allowed. Now, it was kind of interesting. We flew out here to do a quick press tour in upstate New York to talk about this legislation that's being proposed, to talk about the fact that this legislation has been passed in the New York State Senate for 4 years in a row. This year, in fact, we passed 47-14 with the widest margin yet. We're very comfortable and very confident that we have the votes in the state assembly. So far to date, we have not been able to get a vote on the assembly floor. All we're asking for is for the democratic process to play out and for there to be able to be a vote on this matter. Now, I woke up this morning, I turned on CNN to see what was happening in the world, and the first thing I saw was a commercial about the state of New York. And in fact, it was about Buffalo and about economic development and jobs, and that Buffalo is spending $1 billion, as Warren Buffett said, to create jobs. And the other thing it said is, New York, we're open for business. Well, we're here. We're ready for business. And we're not asking for any money. We're not asking for any handouts or any subsidies. What we are asking is for the ability to spend our own money, invest our own money, to create jobs, to create events, to create economic activity, and draw tourists from literally around the world to come see these events that are broadcast in 148 countries around the world in nearly 1 billion homes, to create awareness and allow us to show people from all over the world all the great things about the city of Buffalo. With that, I'll wrap it up and I'll open it up for questions. If anyone has questions from the media of anyone that is up here, we're happy to answer.
Obvious question. There's all this soul searching about brain damage in football players and the Bob Bugner thing in the NHL. I mean, are you worried that these guys, and even the ones who are here that are participating, are down the line in 10 or 15 years are going to be looking back and saying, I wish I hadn't done that?
Certainly. Well, first and foremost, we understand it's a contact sport, but what I will say is we have the most stringent and strict requirements of any sport to make sure that our athletes are safe. And I'll give you an example of why we need to have a regulated environment in the state of New York, okay? In football, if Tom Brady gets a concussion, there's pressure for him to perform maybe the next week or the next week. So he is incented to get on the field as soon as he can. If one of our athletes is injured, or if one of our athletes gets concussed, he is automatically suspended by the State Athletic Commission for upwards of 90 days. 90 to 120 days, where he's not allowed any contact whatsoever. Certainly no fights and certainly no contact in the gym. That is an incredible health and safety precaution that this sport has in place because states do regulate this sport. Now the problem with the state of New York is there's fights happening in the state of New York, yet there's no oversight from the New York State Athletic Commission. Therefore, if an athlete is concussed, there's no one telling him that he cannot participate for any given amount of time to allow for him to recover. These safety provisions are tried and true. Third parties have come in. Johns Hopkins University came in and did a study on the injury rates of mixed martial arts. And they came to the conclusion that unequivocally this sport is safer than boxing, safer than football, safer than most other contact sports. But the reason for that is because the regulations that have been put in place and have been adhered to by companies like ourselves.
And what's an example of some of the jobs that you were talking about that are generated from MMA?
So I'll give you and I can only speak to our company and our promotion. When we come in, we present a world-class, worldwide promotion. And I'll give you a real-time example. We did an event last year in Toronto at the Rogers Centre where we filled 57,000 seats from fans from all over the world. We generated a cash paid gate of $12 million. We paid direct taxes to the province of millions of dollars, as well as we employed around 1,000 people. We paid roughly about 1,000 people between the production people that came into town, and that doesn't include any of the economic activity, such as all the hotel rooms that were filled for those 57,000 people, the production people, the fighters, the trainers, that whole entourage that came in for the whole week leading up to that, all the restaurant activity, all the shopping and retail activity. It was estimated that we generated nearly $43 million in economic activity for those 2 days. So when you look at events that the tourism board wants to bring to the city of Buffalo, particularly sporting events, there's no sporting event outside of maybe the Super Bowl or the Final Four that is going to create the economic activity that we are going to create by bringing a major event to this arena and having it headlined by a fighter like George St. Pierre, who was named twice the #1 sportsman in the country of Canada, where those fans travel and they spend money, and that's what we can bring to the city of Buffalo.
You're talking the same kind of...
Excuse me?
In the assembly, what's the holdup? When's the next vote? Is it going to be a vote?
I'm going to let our assemblyman answer that question.
As was mentioned, we've not been able to get it to the floor. If you actually take a look at the number of sponsors with co and multi-sponsor, I believe that number is probably somewhere 60, 70 sponsors or so. What we need to do, there was, up until this year, there were a handful of members that were strong opponents to allowing this happening. 3 of those members are no longer in the assembly, plus you have Majority Leader Morelli sponsoring the bill. So what I think it's been an education process over time to bring this to the floor. I know I, for example, met with the speaker back in November specifically on this issue, asking him to do what he could to make sure that our conference we'd be able to bring this to the floor for a vote. So I have no doubt that once we can get this bill to the floor, that it's going to pass. And I think you have, I think, more and more members that take a look at it and really investigate and see the safety and the training that goes into it. I think the support is there to get it done.
What's an average fan or voter
Well, we've received a number of emails. I spoke at Canisius College specifically on Ultimate Fighting and MMA. You have a whole group of people that are really in support of that. So if you can take the time to write a letter, send an email out to your respective assembly member or senator, also to the governor's office, all that is important. That all helps because, believe me, once you get a number of those emails,